Well, I'm really excited to welcome Mich Matthews here tonight. We're really lucky to have her joining the LA community. She has a very distinguished background, being at Microsoft for 22 years, eventually becoming the Chief Marketing Officer, as we said, and Senior Vice President, as well as an officer of the company. She oversaw the marketing, which reached into 70 countries, had over $1 billion spend, and covered such amazing products and household names as things like Microsoft Office, Xbox, Bing, and many others. So lots of good things to hear about, and I'm really happy that you're part of our community now. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Good to be here.
Yeah, so you know, maybe you can take us back here. A lot of people are getting their start here at UCLA, and so how did you get your start at Microsoft when you first got on board there?
It was my first job out of college. I, probably like many of you, I was clueless on what I really wanted to do. I did a business degree in Brighton, and I had used an IBM PC to write my dissertation, and Microsoft Word was out there, and I thought, well, this is kind of cool. And I thought marketing sounded fun. So I thought, oh, do I go in tech stuff? Do I go in marketing? And it just so happened that the first job I got was working on MS-DOS, which I'm sure many of you don't remember, but my first role was to launch MS-DOS 4.0.
Wow, all right, that sounds exciting.
Yeah.
And
the company had about 500 people then.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow, I was looking at the numbers now, and so, like as an example, the revenue, which at the time was well under $1 billion, was at $69 billion when you left. So I mean, to imagine like the rapid change in the company during a time frame like that.
The actual interesting number is the income, not the revenue. Just because of the margins in that business are quite remarkable. I think most recently it was about 75 revenue on 25 income. That's, you've got two highly profitable businesses, Windows and Office, which probably won't be, who knows, but it'd be a tough thing to repeat margins like that in business again, because people would have figured it out.
Right, definitely. So you came into something like, we'll say like with MS-DOS, and you had to come in and do the marketing for that. And a lot of people here are interested, in sort of getting a feel for that. How did you come into something where maybe you didn't have tons of domain expertise and you said, okay, now I need to come up to speed and market this?
That's a good question. I don't know, you just got to be fearless and ask the right questions of things that you don't know, and don't be afraid to say you don't know. It was always an interesting thing working with engineers, because I always think working with engineers is like going to math camp, because there's always a right answer. There's a truth because it's fact, it's math, and so there is a logical answer. And when engineers start to interact with marketers, and indeed salespeople are the same, they don't like it so much, because you start doing things that aren't entirely truth. And we talk about feeling and how we might do this. And they're like, well, where's your logic? Where's your facts to say that we're going to position it this way and do the following? So I remember that as a very early experience, kind of the chalk and cheese of positioning and messaging that product, and fighting with engineers on the early days, because they want to tell you 40 things in MS-DOS that everyone should be interested in, whereas you've got 10 seconds to tell someone something that you've got to whittle it down to the gestalt of the most salient points that's going to resonate with that customer.
Yeah, it's really interesting. A lot of times here, when we have the startups that come by, and eventually when we have them pitching for our Accelerator, a lot of times they want to tell us all about the features.
Yeah.
Like, we do these 20 different things, and we've got GPS location, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you can just see like the eyes gloss over of the investors and things like that. So it's especially when they're doing, quick thing where you only have a limited time to hook someone, connecting like on an emotional basis seems to be a much better thing. And I don't know if you can get emotional, but our thing, when we were trying to teach these companies here, was that, you kind of have to connect with something different. It's not always about just bigger, faster, better kind of thing, So it sounds like maybe that was similar.
Well, yeah, it was. I also used to teach this course towards the end at the company, which was about value proposition design. There's actually a science. If you think about value proposition, it's a teeter-totter. And at the bottom, you've got to have your customer. And when you've got your message in balance, that's when you make a lot of money. When you've got something out of whack, it's when your product's dead in the market. I'll give you an example of this. We launched this small business server. So it was a server designed just for nascent small businesses that it was a great price point that you could get up to speed and run everything. What we didn't do, we priced it right, had nice branding, naming, everything else. But what we totally messed up on was the support and how to configure. We hadn't thought about the distribution. And when one of these small businesses needs help, who do they go to? Well, no one was trained on it. You didn't have the distribution. So if you look at that, we had price right, we had product right, we had packaging, we knew who our customer was, but distribution over here and after sales support was totally out of whack. We got those fixed, and then I swear this product did, it absolutely did this. And it seems like a simple thing, but getting every one of those building blocks in value proposition design can sometimes be an art. I mean, even one of my favorite examples on this is sometimes you got a good product and it's dying, but it's because you got the wrong audience. And I think Southwest Airlines is an excellent example of this because they redefined the target audience. They didn't go after the audience that everyone else did. They were like super low cost, no frills, let's redefine the target audience. And, they changed an industry as a result.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Well, so it's interesting because when I look at the way the company evolved and the marketing evolved with it, and the company expanded into so many different categories, and so imagine that was extremely difficult to account for on the marketing side. So how did you guys approach that? Going from say, MS-DOS to all these myriad products out there.
It was actually more logical than it might sound because the company started off as a developer company selling COBOL, C. There's a whole universe of dudes that you're competing against there, super technical in nature. Then from that, a natural progression from a developer platform is to build an OS. So you morph into building operating systems. And then from that, you've got to have apps that sit on top of that operating system. So you start to build Excel and Word, and there's a whole different bunch of guys you're competing with there, Lotus, WordPerfect, and Ball, and all people that I'm sure no one here remembers. And then, from that, there's a natural evolution that the internet comes along and you've got a browser. And then there's people that have their PC in their living room, but they want to do more than just personal computer in their living room. So we're like, okay, there needs to be an API in the living room for an entertainment system. Then comes Xbox. And then there's a bunch of categories that quite frankly are, we missed those, we better get in them, which are search and phones.
Right. Wow, well that's still, it's really interesting to me that, and it was also very nice, I guess, for your career that kind of, kept things fresh and you were able to constantly have those new challenges, and, that seems pretty
that
amazing.
was such a privilege that, it really was never a dull moment because on any given day I could be working with the developer community, which is a more technical, substantive discussion. They don't want to be spun, they just want the facts. Developers like to kibitz with each other and gnash their teeth over stuff. So the marketing and the infrastructure that you would give them to enable that is quite different than, let's say, if you're targeting mums with Windows PCs. And so I was so fortunate that I got to do product marketing, brand marketing, segment marketing, B2B, consumer, and so on because of the depth and variety of audiences that we got to sell products to.
Was there any one that you really was one of your favorites, or where you kind of really found an attachment to that?
No, they're all my children.
right.
No, I don't think, I don't, no, not product in particularly. There's campaigns I think about more fondly than others.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I went back and looked at the way the logo had changed over the years, and to see all of that evolution as well. And
The first one is still the coolest one because it's got the little O with the floppy disk, you know, the cutout for the middle, how it used to be.
Yeah, no, it kind of like took me back, like going back, like to see all of them. It's like to see them there.
It's not always a good thing though, changing your logo that many times. It's not necessarily something to be proud of. You shouldn't dick with your logo too much.
Fair enough. Now you've also done a lot, you know, at Microsoft. You also had a mentoring program for females, and you've done a lot on that front as well. And so, you know, how is it being a female executive, and your experience from that point of view?
Well, I would say Microsoft is gender neutral, and you could argue that's both a good thing and a bad thing. I fundamentally believe that women are wired different and are very different from men. And men, someone would say I'm making sweeping generalizations, but this is my point of view, that men are more comfortable having confrontation. Men are probably more comfortable being a little bit more aggressive and in your face, whereas women would find other ways to, let's say, have that same conversation. And in the, I believe actually in the tech world, it's dominated by men, and that's largely because, you know, we have such a struggle with women going into math and CS. If there were more women going into math and CS, I think, you know, technology workplaces would look quite different. So it's largely a male-oriented, dominated by men, and so it's a very type A, in-your-face culture, and that isn't always a comfortable place for a lot of women. You either have to develop new techniques and take yourself outside of your comfort zone of who you are in order to, you know, show up and participate. And I know in many of the women that I mentor and continue to mentor, that's often a draining thing because you have to yet again get up and be something that's not naturally you if you're going to get heard at that table, if you're going to make sure everyone knows that you did that and not that other person. That and another thing, women aren't as good as being self-promoters. A man would ask for a promotion. A woman will expect that it's going to come. It's really, and I saw this. I managed 7,000 people, and you know, it's amazing when you see it on that scale. You absolutely see that. And so I was the most senior woman there when I was promoted to the executive team, and so it was a very lonely place. And so I decided that you know, it would be great if there was some other community. So I asked the next probably about 25 senior women to get together and come have drinks and dinner with me. And it was actually a funny story now, but at the time they're like so suspicious of me because it's like, oh, what's she doing? You know, is she studying us? And is there a report going to go back to someone? And so I split it up into two groups, so it was like manageable, you know, 12 and 15 people. And after we got over the hump of the first one and people realized that it's really nice to have a glass of wine with another woman and talk about great things going at work, bad things, sharing best practice and so on. And so we did that for a good 18 months, and then it became like a real, we loved each other's company, fantastic. And after 18 months, I said, okay, I'm doing this for you guys. You've got to reach down for the next 25 women in your sphere of influence and do it. And eventually we got all the way down through the company, believe it or not, and started these, everything wasn't wine and dinners. A lot of it was just coffee. But those mentor programs went an awful long way. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of, seeing like some of those women get promoted, and you know, they're running billion-dollar businesses. And it's just magic.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow, very, very cool. So, you know, now, you know, as we've seen a lot of the entrepreneurship here today, especially, you know, with Startup UCLA, we're about empowering students to do entrepreneurship in the UCLA community and the LA community, and there's been this trend of, you know, sort of getting younger and younger as far as entrepreneurs go, and obviously Microsoft was one of the big examples of this being founded with Bill Gates being so young. And so, what are your thoughts about, you know, sort of the changing view of entrepreneurship right now and how that's, you know, sort of affecting the landscape?
Yeah, well, it's dramatic how it's changed. I mean, back when Bill dropped out, that was just, you know, the most dreadful thing, that you would leave college and do that. And I think the environment, there's now there's a norm that it's okay for it to do it because we've seen others do it and they've been terribly successful. Therefore, you're really not screwing up your life by doing it. So I think to begin with, students have more permission to do that, and it's like, if safe is probably the wrong word, but you could see quarters to encourage you. I think what's absolutely fantastic now for entrepreneurs is like the stuff you're doing, not to suck up, but the fact that
you're invited back anytime you want.
No, but these programs exist, and you can be a guy with a dream and $1, and you get in the right program, and you can get in front of people who can coach you on coding, who can coach you on commerce sites, who can coach you on how to do your PR and so on, because you've got that infrastructure. And Boston, New York, obviously Northern California, and I didn't know it was as prolific as it is down here when I moved down here, so it's like a real pleasant surprise to see how many of these incubators and people who have done this before are willing to spend their time and coach people. But I guess the last thing I would say, though, one thing that's true then, back then, when Bill dropped out, and is still true today, it's all about that individual, that entrepreneur. Do they have the passion? Do they have the right idea? Do they have the IQ? Are they going to walk through a wall and sweat blood just to make this thing happen? And are they in the right market?
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think especially when we see super early stage deals and companies, there's nothing for us to see as far as traction necessarily, or track record, or especially as people are getting younger. And so I completely agree. I think, we have to see that person who's, wholly dedicated to it. And
they got it. That's right. They live it.
Yeah.
That passion just oozes through and is so profound.
Mm-hmm. So now, we're obviously very excited that you're here in LA now, and like you said, I know you got kind of getting caught up in the community here and understanding what's going on. And so, what have been your thoughts so far, about coming to LA and seeing the entrepreneurial community here? Has anything struck you off the bat, or? No,
one thing that I didn't realize before I came here, that it's the LA area, the number of engineers that come out of this community and don't stay here. That I found mind-blowing. Because, in my previous life, kids from Waterloo stayed in Waterloo, kids at MIT, you need to look at how insanely wonderful it is up by Stanford. These kids graduate, there's a hothouse at the university, and so the sweet little startups spawn up all around that university, and it's not so much here. I think I had this conversation with you. The engineering numbers are staggering, right?
Yeah. It's actually it produces as a city the most engineers of any city in the U.S. But the numbers, and they're looking into this right now, are about half of them leave.
Right.
So it's so being able to connect them, with the right opportunities is something that we're trying to do here, and the city is also working on with the mayor's council. So. You're definitely right. It is shocking.
It's such an opportunity, though. This town has been known for other stuff, and but to know that fact, and this town's known for content and entertainment, it's a little bizarre.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll be changing that soon.
Yes, you will, my man.
So wonderful. So if I had to jump in, because I think a lot of times in these talks, people don't tend to get your viewpoint on today as much. We go through a lot of the history of things, and so when you look at the marketplace today, what excites you? Are there any companies? Are there any trends? Is there anything you're looking at and thinking, wow, that's really exciting, or that's the next big thing? Yeah,
a couple of things. I was at CES last week. I don't know whether any of you had a chance to go. Well, first stating the obvious, mobile, and not just seeing, mobile used to be in a hall at CES. I've been going to CES when it was Comdex, so it's like very long time. And it used to be a hall, mobile, and now it's CES, because everything is mobile. And you add that with the number of smartphones being sold outside the United States. This is where I think it gets, super interesting. Just because of telephone use outside the United States is on the lunatic fringe compared to here. Then when you think about all those people potentially getting smartphones And obviously I look at the world through a marketer's lens, but I look at something like that and say, wow, someday someone doing my old job will be able to sit there and say, I want humans with this characteristic in this city who are interested in this product, and I'm going to provide them the offer, and you'll be able to buy that data and deliver that. So not only is that fantastic to that customer who is carrying that phone and can get that offer in front of that store that today it's $50 off, or I go to Nordstrom and the La Mer cream that I buy for too much money, which I nearly need to stop buying, has some discount on it. The loyalty that you can create there, how efficient you can make markets. When you think about all those ad dollars moving, so the customer wins, the brand wins. So everything about mobile I think is fantastic. The other thing that struck me at CES is health. And it's truly fantastic, the number of devices, not necessarily phones, there's lots of apps, but now either sensors to make us live our lives better or longer. Whether it's, and some of this is life or death, right? If for some people, if you're testing your blood or whatever, but it could be anything from your sleep patterns and looking at your energy, how you are during the day, what your mood is like. I mean, there was some crazy things, but you can imagine, yes, I could see a subscription model on some of those things. And so how it's redefining health is super, super exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something that speaks to people here being near UCLA and being near such a world-renowned hospital and medical institute, is this quantified self movement. And so that's definitely something that we're hoping we're going to see in more of the applications coming forward, is sort of combining some of those things, the sensors, and integrating that into life. And it's interesting, I've seen some of them, like where you put the band around your head and you sleep, and it tells you, those aspects of, REM and things like that.
Uh-huh.
And so it's interesting, to see how far those early adopters are able to take it, and see if it really catches on. I think you're definitely right. It seems like that's a big thing, and it's with us all the time, Although one thing I was told to understand about the female demographic is that they sometimes have it in their phone, in their bag, their phone in their bag. And so that was something that a lot of the companies were struggling with, was that it wasn't on the way it would be with a male.
Yeah.
So,
Well, a bunch of the things I saw were not mobile. There was,
Yeah, just programs.
You wear a sensor.
Right. Yeah, lots of interesting stuff there.
And then the one other thing is, again, this is stating the obvious, but again, through my marketer's lens, this discussion about big data and what will happen quite soon. Who knows when quite soon is, but it's going to happen. It started with Google, with people indicating, hey, this is what I want, right? You think about all that data that's captured there of all those wants of profiles of humans. Then you've got, it's Google, we started with what I need. So all that data about humans everywhere around the world, telegraphing what they need. Then you move to, and this is what I like, and all that data about, okay, and now you've got, and this is who I am, not just on Facebook, but on the proliferation. If you just take those 4 parts of the profile, that if this data all comes together, or even just some parts of that data, again, it's the holy grail for both if you're interested in spending some money on purchasing something, to match you with that right brand, that brand's ability to, again, deliver information to you. So I just think there's such a wealth of opportunity for businesses to spawn out of this gorgeous amount of data that we're going to get, that we're going to be able to pass and cut and be super targeted with.
Yeah, definitely. Another trend I think is really interesting that relates, I think, to that is sort of integrating the purchasing habits, and now that we're kind of going to a digital wallet, and so that data seems like it hasn't quite been crossed into the other ones yet.
Well, it sits in the 4 big silos right now, so who knows, but nonetheless, those silos at some juncture will sell the data. So as long as there's the sweet little marketing company who knows how to take that data, customize it, and sell it to some brand for a lot of money, that there's a lot of business to be made there.
Wonderful. Okay. So that sort of leads us in, I think, to I know that you've also looked at things as an investor, and so when you are looking at an investment, what are the types of things you look for, like in a founder or a founding team?
It's the founder has to have. I look for passion. I mean, passion for the technology, and you can tell whether someone's bleeding their idea and they have such a conviction about why they're right, and they're obviously, when you do the precision questioning thing, that they understand this market inside and out. They've studied the market, they can quote you numbers, there's no vagaries, they know who the competitors are, they can articulate why the two dudes who went, before failed, well, this is why they didn't get it right, and here's what we learned from it. And you look at, you always look for someone who's going to get you beyond that nascent phase. At some point, they've got to stop being the pointy head, and they've got to be the person who can, go raise money or stand in front of employees and encourage people and make them want to come to the company. So you look for someone who's got some runway to be able to do that too, which I think is a somewhat harder thing to road test on kind of that first interaction. You can get the idea, but it isn't until you spend sufficient time that you can say, okay, do they have runway to go from founder to someone who can really operate this thing?
Well, that's an interesting perspective. I don't hear that as much. So, like kind of seeing, can they grow with the company and, continue on with that role? Because a lot of times with the younger entrepreneurs, I think they see like a Mark Zuckerberg model, where then they want to bring in their Sheryl Sandberg and, bring in people around them, and I don't know if they're all.
But if you look at that, but it took Mark a while before he brought in Sheryl.
Right.
I mean, it was, right. And you look at someone like Mark, and he is the guy who can, I think, do both things. I think he's being underestimated as a business person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, wonderful. So, what advice would you say that you have for startups, which I'm sure there's a lot of them in the room right now, who want to partner with a large company like a Microsoft?
Oh, that's a good question. It's tough when you're dealing with a large organization because, when I left, there was 90,000 people. So when you're that big, it's a very Byzantine thing there are so many entry points and so many doors closing. The principal thing I would say is, if you're going to get traction with a company of that complexity, it's about human relationships. You got to know someone and get a sponsor to get that on-ramp. Someone who can be that advocate and say, hey, met these guys at CES, I think you should have a conversation, let me connect you. So you actually have someone who knows the lay of the land to connect you and get you that on-ramp. Because cold calling in those large organizations, particularly, I used to, I feel badly now that I've left, but the number of people would say, I want a meeting, I want a meeting, I want a meeting. It's just like, no, there's only so many hours in the day, and I'm sorry, you're not on my priority list. So anyone starting up, when you're dealing with someone that complex, has to be all about a human relationship.
Interesting. And would you say meeting, like you said, at a conference or something like that, something along those lines would be the best way to do something like that, or?
Yes.
Okay.
But I see people go to conferences and don't do that. You have to work a room, and it's hard work, and it's lonely, and you got to take a lot of cards. But you got to hustle.
Right. Yeah, I know. I always try to tell our people, you don't want to just go there and sit on your phone.
Right.
And I see people go in there, it's like,
exactly.
And the other thing I think that's also a lot of times at the conferences is people go sit in all the presentations and they miss out on the networking that's occurring behind the presentations, and I try to tell a lot of times, hey, you want to spend, at least half your time back there just trying to meet people, because that's really what you're going to take with it. So.
For sure. But it's an easiest thing for us to say and sit here and do, and if you're young and you're new and you don't know a soul, and to have the balls to go up to someone and hey, let me introduce myself, here's what I do, I'm interested in so and so. You've really got to push yourself.
Right, definitely. So I imagine you were at Microsoft for a large chunk of your career, and I'm sure you were asked to join numerous startups along the way, or new ventures, or get pulled into other companies. You know, why do you think you stayed there the whole time as opposed to ever jumping ship, you know, which seems pretty uncommon now in these days?
A couple of things. First, this is going to sound silly, but I felt it was our company. I felt a big ownership in it starting so early, and you know, being as lucky as I was to work so closely with Bill and Steve, there was like a moral obligation. Again, I'm sure it probably sounds silly, but that was one aspect. Second was truly never a dull moment because of the diversity and breadth of things I got to play with. I mean, my sandbox was very big, so I would never just serially be on Xbox. You could go work on Bing or Windows or some communication disaster or do some fun R&D thing. There was always that aspect. And I guess the third one for me, it was like, I called it sport. And I firmly believe business is a game. It really is. It's just, you have your chips. Do you use your chips in the right way? Do you have the right bets? Are you figuring out what your competitor's doing? Are you one step ahead of them? You're hiring the right people, putting them on the right jobs. You know, it really is just, it's a big old game. And Microsoft was no different. It was a game. And it was sport. It was fantastic to get up every day and say, how are we going to make money? And what new thing can we do? And again, so fortunate that the company, if you came up with an idea and it was a good idea, you get the money and it was like, let's try it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it also speaks, you know, like the success of the company that, I mean, there's a number of the executives did stay for such a long period of time. You know, you guys were able to retain people, you know, for large periods of time, and we're not doing those, you know, big searches for people that, you know, we tend to see with a lot of the other
That's
companies,
right.
you know?
That's right. I do think a lot of that, however, had to also do with proximity. I mean, if you're in Northern California, your opportunity, if you're in the tech industry, to not have to uproot your kids from their school and go to Sun, to Oracle, to Google, to sweet little startup. I mean, it's just there, right? Whereas in Seattle, you don't pass through Seattle. It's up there, and it rains a lot. And I guess there's Amazon, and there's a reason why Google and Facebook and everyone else put their offices up there so they could start to take developer talent and incentivize them. But, you know, if you wanted to run a big old thing and you like living in the Pacific Northwest, you might just stay there for a very long time.
Yeah, definitely. So for the students in the audience who are considering going to to a larger organization like a Microsoft or going to a startup, you know, how should they be thinking about an option like that? You know, do you have any advice for them on that?
Yeah, I would say it depends how you're wired. If you've got this, I mean, you've got to hold a mirror up to yourself and say, do I really have the chops with no business experience that I know that I can go out on my own and do this thing? And it's got to be just, I think, so burning in you to do that, that you hold up the mirror and just say, that's all I think about night and day is this idea, this thing. You know, then you'll be miserable if you go take another job because you'll always be thinking, shit, you know, should have gone done that other thing. I wonder if someone's going to come in and do it. So I think that's just like how you're wired. And then I think, you know, the other route of it, and I saw plenty of people do this, you go to somewhere like Google or Microsoft or Facebook or Oracle, and basically you do an MBA there, the equivalent of a Facebook MBA, and you're there for 2 years, and you get sheep dipped into how to ship a product, which you will learn in droves at one of these places. I mean, you will see it as an art on how you put code in, how it gets tested, how we look at it overnight, how we go after the bugs, how we get something out of the door. And that is one incredible experience that puts such a strong foundation for you to then take that knowledge that you garnered at those companies and go off and do it. Now, I'm sure those companies, including Microsoft, wouldn't be happy that I'm saying that, but I saw it happen, you know, a lot of time that you get some really great kids out of college. They get immersed in how to ship a product, and it's not just engineering, it's how to market a product or how to learn communications or whatever. And you experience it in one of these big companies, and it's the equivalent of a, you know, degree in how to do it, and then you can go scratch that entrepreneurial itch. But again, I would say it's how you're wired. on whether it's the right thing for you or not.
Right, definitely. Wonderful. Okay, well, before we jump into questions from the audience, I was just going to ask if you have any sort of words for wisdom for those who are just kind of starting out in their career right now.
Number one, do something that you're passionate about that makes you happy. Because if you don't, you'll end up in something called a job, and it'll be miserable. You never want to get up and brush your teeth and think, ugh. You want to get up and it's something that, I'm going to get to do that again today, and I see my friends and we'll try some new stuff. So follow your passion, find something you do that you love. And plus, if you find something that you love, you're probably good at it. Because it's rare humans love something that they're really useless at, right? Because we get frustrated about those things. So number one. Number two, again, easy for me to say here because I worked for a while, but the sooner you figure out what you're good at, what you're not good at, but you will get better. Let's say you'll get a C+ or a B, but you never get to an A, and what you're crap at. And I used to say this to people that I mentored. As soon as you figure those three things out, boy, you can get going, because you won't be making career choices about things that you're crap at. I mean, you don't know today. You think you may be good with Excel and you can run a P&L, but you may end up doing it. And I mean, it happened to me. I took a job running the US subsidiary. So I was like, yeah, I'm running marketing, but I'll also run sales. I'll have a P&L for the United States. Boy, I was not happy because I had to live in Excel. I was not doing the stuff that I'm good at, which is creating ideas and operationalizing them. I was living in a P&L, looking at revenue every month, figuring out how we're going to make our numbers, and disproportionately spending time on that. You know, it was, I look back at it now, and it was, fantastic that I figured that out. It took me longer than I should have done, but I would never go do that again. And after that experience, I then surrounded myself with people who love that, because then you can still do it, but you've got dudes you can go to who are going to run that for you. So you start taking jobs and you go after promotions on things that you're good at, and that's when your career takes off. And then for those things that you're always never going to excel at, but you can get to a pretty sufficient level. When you figure that out, that's when those are the training courses you take, the books you read, the people, your mentors around you are good at those things. And so you start to broaden yourself as an individual in your skills and talents. And I think you're a much happier person. And then the last thing I would say, if you don't have a mentor, you need to leave here, and your assignment is go get one, because you want someone who's been around the block a few times, and you want someone that you should get with your mentor, I would say at least once a month. If they're in something orthogonal to what you're in, at least once a quarter. But this is the person that you're in a pickle, you can pick up the phone and to say, this is how I handled this. What would you have done in this circumstance? Or I'm so paralyzed right now, I don't know to go this way or that way. Can you help me, just walk me through it, how you would think about the two opportunities ahead of me? Or, finding someone who is that seasoned person who can help navigate will help you avoid because everyone's done it before at some point. There's someone out there who's made that mistake that you're going to make, or there's someone who made the great choice that you think you might about to make. So get yourself a mentor, but also recognize that mentors come and go. People are useful maybe for where you are in your career. You want this person for 24 months, and then find another person who can nurture and help you grow and make those decisions.
Wonderful. All right, great. So, okay, so now we're going to go ahead and open it up to the audience here. So, all right, why don't we go ahead here?
Hi, my name's Cho. First, I want to thank you for coming here to give us this nice talk. Earlier, you talked about the rise of big data, how it is a really exciting opportunity, and it's definitely generating a lot of businesses. But on the other hand, I guess the biggest concern here is user privacy.
Yeah.
And so, how could you suggest a couple ways for small startups to handle user privacy issues? Thank you.
You're right. That's of course the biggest barrier. But I also believe that we'll see, people's willingness if they're going to get a discount for their data. I mean, it's remarkable today what everyone is putting out there. We all squawk about privacy, but when you look at what's out there already about people and what can get tracked down, it's shocking. I'm trying to sell my house up in Seattle, and we took it off the market because we had an offer and we thought it was going to fall through, and so we didn't want it to be the house that fell through and so on. So we took it off the market, and like my cell phone, no one can get my cell phone number or my name, and they didn't know it was my name on this property. That afternoon, I got 4 calls from realtors that I'd never heard of who understood that my listing had gone and wanted to get it. And then I discovered that there's this thing out there on the web where you can match addresses and get people's cell phone number, and it's totally legal. So I punctuate the question with that because it's like quite amazing right now of permissions that you thought you hadn't give that just exist out there. That said, those things that we do give permission about, tracking cookies, it's just even if the tiny bit of permission that we give today and the data that exists is I wouldn't say largely unmined, but again, the opportunities to do really smart things with that data. So I'm saying that I think there's opportunity in what we have today, and it will continue to improve. And then eventually, I think the Holy Grail data will provide more opportunities for people.
Hi, my name is Sumit. I'm an analyst in Adam from Cloud. Thank you so much for coming over. I have a couple of questions. One is Microsoft missed a couple of big stories, like the whole search, then the social networking side of things. What was the thought process? Like, why did Microsoft not invest in those areas? And once we figured out, what was the aftermath of that? And second is, how do you turn a brand around? What are some of the thought process? What are some of the activities that companies or Microsoft needs to do, or any company needs to do, if the brand is not that good, and how do you turn it around?
On the first one, that's the $60 million question that you could argue that people were too busy tending to the existing insanely profitable businesses. Don't mess those up because the company really goes downhill if you do that. And, people weren't investing in the right areas. There's 1,200 guys at the company who are just PhDs. They're as pointy head guys as you can get. And they're paid not to ship a product, but to invent the future. And that's just, there's one in Moscow, there's one in India, there's one here, there's one in Cambridge. I know I'm missing out, there's one in Poland. I mean, just the cream to the cream of computer scientists around the world. And so there are things that they miss, but at the same point, there's something like, Kinect, actually, the sensor with Xbox came out of that group. And, that's another very healthy, highly profitable business. I think the search thing is particularly, people put the spotlight on search, and I think quite rightly, because you've got Google, $75 billion business. They are the dominant player, and people expect Microsoft, having been the dominant player in operating systems and applications and infrastructure and so on, that they should be a dominant player in that. And the fact is, we were just late to see that. Just late. There were things that the company was early on, things the company was late. The company was early on phones. The company came out with this thing, you all wouldn't remember, but this thing called the Pocket PC, and we had this operating system called WinCE, which was an operating system for mobile devices. That one is early, right idea, very, very poor execution. So there is a myriad of things, both missing things and not executing. In terms of your second question about brand turnaround, the first thing I'd say is you have to understand with some precision the situation you're in. Now, I was obviously spoiled that I had a budget. I could go out and command research, expensive research that you really know with some precision about the attributes of your brand, how people think about you relative to the competition. You could segment your target audience to know, are there differences? For example, there's differences, people who live on the West Coast and people who live on the East Coast of the brand Microsoft. Middle America, just love it. It means low cost, high volume, you democratize technology. It does. You take the majority of America, and that's what it means. Now, if you were reading the press at a certain period of time, you would think, no way. You know, we all think what everyone else thinks, which is they're losers and they're going out of business soon because Linux has come along or whatever it happens to be. So it's always important not to read the press. You read the press, sorry, that came out wrong, not to believe everything you read in the press. Take your pulse and understand precisely where you are with customers, because then you figure out what problem you've got. Is it an awareness problem? Is it a perception problem? Is it simply a cognoscenti problem? You know, I don't have a problem actually with the brands. I have a problem with all the press in San Francisco, and New York is what I have a problem with. So first understand that, and then you run your campaign according to what you're trying to solve for. I'll give you an example of this, which is one that really surprised me. I'll give you the Microsoft example. During the 90s and early in this century, the Department of Justice sued Microsoft, and it went on for several years. And during that period of time, we had a very high-profile lawsuit in Washington, D.C., and there were emails and there were videos, and it just every single day the company got the equivalent of, you know, it got billions of dollars of negative publicity, New York Times front page, and so on. So, you know, living through that was really interesting, because that's when, you know, I started doing the polling to understand what's going on at the brand level of Microsoft, not the product level, the brand level. And this is where we saw, hey, general public says we're winning because I get cheaper and cheaper PCs, and life's good because my kids excelling at school because I just went to Best Buy and got a PC for $500. Whereas the people who are really informed and in the tech community and in Washington, D.C. obviously thought differently, because they're more immersed, they're reading the press and so on, so they think differently about the brand. So we knew we had a massive problem in DC, to cut a long story short, and we had to reposition the company. And what I found out during that is Washington, DC admired what we had done, but they feared us. They thought we were motivated by money. We weren't motivated by doing right by the consumer. And so once we found that out, I set about a campaign in Washington, DC. Now, I'm not a believer that you always run expensive TV advertising and it solves it. But in this case, it was amazing to see when we started talking about our motivation to Washington, D.C. in a very broad way, how you can change the numbers over time. And believe me, I'm not saying, hey, just run some TV ads, because there's a lot more than that. You have to spend time truly explaining yourself to people. This is what we do. This is the number of companies that are being created. These are the number of people employed. This is what businesses are getting out of the benefit of it. We are a global company. Here's what we're doing for America around the rest of the world, and so on and so forth. But you tell a story, and you know, I was so proud of, you know, when I left the company, how that brand had been totally repositioned and embraced by Washington, D.C.
I can just ask.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Beate. I actually sold a company to Corbis, so I
Oh,
come
great.
from the. Thank you. I come from the creative community. So my question really goes that. So my background's all photography, you know, content creation. We've been seeing that there's a large commoditization of content. How do you expect that creativity will make a reappearance and become more important, or will we continue to see that it's just a whole bunch of information content that flies through?
No, I think it's, you know, that statement, content is king, is just going to be, it is just going to continue to thrive. The technology isn't quite there, but the ability very soon to use your phone as a VCR to play content on your big screen in TV, we're not far off that. So when you think about the opportunity, I mean, the barriers to entry today, right, are zero. Anyone with their phone can take a piece of content, create a piece of content. If you've got your PC, how sophisticated it can be now on creating that content. The distribution vehicles, like today, they exist. So again, the barriers to entry aren't that hard. The fact that you can then start to broadcast this in your living room, I think is absolutely mind-blowing. I'm on the board of advisory board of Nerdist Industries, which is one of the top new YouTube channels. So I'm spending, I'm pretty close to this, and that's really, really interesting when you say, hey, you could produce a whole new channel with a certain demographic, and we're not talking huge amounts of money. Then eventually, when you cross the barrier of something like YouTube, let's say, can become this next network to broadcast things. So I'm an absolute huge believer in content. People, for the beginning of time, people love storytelling. We all love stories. We all like to tell them, get entertained by them, get sucked into them, and I'm a firm believer that it's going to continue, and with video, it's just fantastic what's ahead.
Thank you.
Take 2 more questions here.
Thank you so much for coming. My name's Jonathan, and kind of piggybacking off of that question, content is key, and it's what we've kind of been ingrained with. But when you make your pitches in front of investors, and you've seen both as a creative and now as an investor, it always boils down to, well, how's it going to make money? Do you have any advice on kind of that balance between our content, but also finding a way to make money off of that content and kind of pitching it perfectly? Because we're dealing with a lot of investors, they only see the financial part and they don't see the other side of it. At least in the discussion we've had so far.
Yeah, no, in an investment meeting, you need to have a point of view about how to make money, because fortunately or unfortunately, there's so many other people like you with a great content idea. I mean, we're Pinterest, great content idea, right?
So what?
That's an interesting investor meeting going on there, So sorry, I don't have any pearls for wisdom there. If it was a different kind of meeting, yeah, but an investor meeting, no. You better have a point of view about how you're going to make some money.
Last question.
Hi, my name is Asla. Thank you very much for your advice. I want to know what is the coolest thing or technology that Microsoft is working on. And my second question is, a few months ago, I looked at the Microsoft website. I saw that they're working on the home automation operating system. What do you think about the home automation market?
Well,
question. I'm sorry, it's hard to hear back here.
The lady asked, what's the coolest thing that Microsoft's working on? And the second, what do I think to home automation? I'm sorry to tell you, I left a little while ago, and even if I work there, I couldn't tell you the coolest thing that they're working on. Because in this industry, you're dead 2 years before you know it if you share what's under the hood. But if you ask me what I now looking at the company, what little I know that I'm most excited about, I think it's the opportunity we connect and connect apps and where that can take us. I think there's a whole host of businesses, development businesses, infrastructure business, just with that technology. The second part about home automation, sorry, it's not my thing. I can tell you I hate Crestron because I've just moved into a new house, and was it Light Touch and Crestron? If ever there's an opportunity for someone to build a business about big home automation that works, that you could easily add something without getting a bill from the programmer to add a new light switch, there's another $1,000. It's a big opportunity there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for
Oh, you're
coming
so
here
welcome.
tonight.
Thank you.